Hey, Mark, last time we talked a lot about quantum computing, and it was super interesting. I'm very curious about some of the applications for the approaches that you described. And I'll tell you one thing that I'm very interested in is the production of random numbers, because we see random numbers are the basis for all kinds of things, for keeping secrets in particular. So that would be encryption or producing uncrackable passwords. And the current techniques don't produce numbers with enough randomness. So in other words, we don't have a way to get to random numbers today. Can you tell me if help is on the way and how?
Yeah, so we've had a number of developments that have hit over the past 4 years in the development of something called quantum random number generators. Now, as you mentioned, on a classical computer, it doesn't really have a method of generating random numbers. It has many methods of generating pseudo-random numbers. But it's that pseudo part that if you're trusting the encryption of missile launch codes, that pseudo part should make you not sleep at night. Now, the laws of physics tell us that when we get down to quantum size, there are truly random events that happen. Whether it's the decay of radioactive isotopes, these are things that happen randomly in that there is no cause and effect. They just friggin' happen, kind of like Detroit making the playoffs, right? It's one of those kinds of things. You cannot predict this. So the idea here is, what if we could use some sort of quantum phenomena, and if we chained enough of them together, and we would be able to come up with a truly random bit. Now, I mentioned about 4 years ago, there were some products, primarily from some companies out of Switzerland, had these random numbers. Immediately, other people working on it decided to challenge whether they were actually quantum and actually random. So there's been kind of this arms race, but suffice it to say, the Swiss company I mentioned has signed a deal with Samsung. They are now distributing quantum random number generators on smartphone prototypes. So this tells you this is like for real.
Well, I have a question. So is this sort of quantum random number generation as a service? You have a thin client on this phone that then talks to some crazy equipment that can then make these observations, or how? Maybe I'm rat holing a little bit here, but I'm really dying to know how this works at all.
Well, you've hit on something. Believe it or not, there's this thing out there called entropy as a service, right?
Really?
Where you can actually call up, and depending upon, hey, I want a number between 1 and 10, or whatever bizarre randomness you want. There are services out there that do have quantum random number generators. However, entropy on a chip is now all the rage. That's what folks are trying
Ah,
to get. And one of the things they're exploiting is something you mentioned in our previous episode, which is that as we scale down silicon circuits, you get to this point where you get electron tunneling, where an electron disappears from the conductor it's on and reappears some other place nearby. So our classical computers, as we shrink them smaller and smaller, they're accidentally becoming quantumish.
or maybe
So,
they were always quantumish, but the effect is starting to be more apparent.
well, you know what? Schrodinger's cat would be rolling over in his grave. Or,
Maybe not.
okay, yeah, 19 geek humor points on that.